Hey, everybody, welcome to Frontline. This is Colonel David Giamona on the Battle Ready Network. And you can follow us on Facebook and subscribe to Battle Ready Ministries on YouTube and watch us on Roku TV on the Remnant channel. And please sign up for our Battle Ready newsletter at battleready.org. I'll tell you, we have a wonderful, wonderful show today. We have Cynthia Garrett on with us today. And I can already tell you it's going to be a great show, so stay tuned for that. Cynthia is a popular American television show host, an executive producer, a philanthropist, an author, and a very hardworking lady that has gone through some tremendous trials in her life. And today we bring you Cynthia. Cynthia, good to have you on the show today.
Hi, David. It's really good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
You know, Cynthia, I've reading your bio and look at some of your books and watching you on podcasts. One thing that comes clear to me, as I'd said earlier, you're a very busy lady, involved in many things, and you have grew up in a very difficult life. So we'll start there. So for some of us, our audience that may not know who you are, which I doubt that, but if they don't, tell us about, as we start out the show, the beginning, you went through some very difficult sexual abuse, rape, all kinds of things that led you into drugs and the Hollywood scene. So kind of take us through that journey, if you don't mind, for the next few moments.
Well, it's, I think my situation, in hindsight through the years, what I'm really learning is that my situation looks a lot like a lot of people's, which is scary. And let me tell you what I mean. I had great parents, went to great schools, and had great friends. I just had these things that would happen. I was sexually abused, as was my baby sister, in our home by a relative for about 3 years when we were both little girls. And that I carried the scars of that into my young adulthood. Now I was an overachiever, so everything on the outside looked great. It was when everything on the inside started to crumble and I started to question myself, low self-esteem, depression, sadness, things I couldn't explain because of the shame that I was carrying from what was done to me by an older relative when I was a little girl. And so I think that was really, I call it the Pandora's box, that once I opened it, I needed to deal with it, because opening it, caused me as a young woman in my 20s to just, you try to numb the pain. You have shame and you have something like that in your past, and you blame yourself. For me, numbing the pain was, was the 80s. Cocaine and alcohol. You can numb the pain away. And my friends were famous and in movies, and everybody was doing it. And I was in a world where nobody had I was raised in Catholic schools, but there was no one around me with the spiritual wisdom, really, that I try to give to young women today, and say, hey, listen, what you're doing is you're doing it to yourself. You're abusing yourself to deal with someone else's abuse. And we need to deal with that and look at that and get some deep inner healing. And so I tried to really, I think, fill the void with everything and anything, including relationships, looking for love. And when I really ran into a wall and ran off as a young girl in my 20s and married the wrong guy, I ended up finding Jesus when I hit a wall with this marriage and ended up in a prison cell in Italy and a star witness in a trial against this man that I married that I knew 2 months. A lot of dysfunction.
So many things, Cynthia, to unpack here. But, what would you say, before we go on to the marriage and the drugs and what Jesus did to you in that Italian jail? And by the way, I'm Sicilian, so I kind of understand. I've been over there and lived over there, actually. But, there are a lot of ladies, or maybe young ladies, watching the show today that say, hey, I want to be like Cynthia. I want to be a Hollywood star. I want to, have the fame, the name. I want to have the money. My experience has been, I want you to share yours. Mine is, once you reach the top, there's really nothing there. Was that your experience as well?
Yeah. And yes, and even worse, once you reach the top, you really are at the end of yourself. And so you have nowhere else to look except up, or you continue to look out and get consumed by wherever you think you are. And what I was surrounded with were even some good people who would have called themselves Christians, but nobody was living for Christ. No one was surrendered to Christ as Lord of their life and their decisions and their money and their homes and their children and the way they thought and the way they interacted with others. So, you know, it's a very shallow Jesus at the top of that world. And even, and I, no judgments, because I know everyone has a journey. However, facts are facts, right? The truth is the
Mm,
truth. And the
mm.
reality is that, you know, where humans can make an allowance for their flesh, they really will. And there's no place like Hollywood for support in making allowances for your flesh. No.
Wow, that's a statement. You've experienced everything, and I mean you're extremely busy even now with many things that you're doing. But you married this man. You're in your 20s. Is the wrong guy. He was into the drugs and the cartels and all that. You were arrested in Italy. What happened there in the jail, and how did that all come about?
Well, it's I think the most beautiful book I will have ever written is the one about my testimony, right? This is my testimony. This prodigal daughter, a journey home to identity. I had lost my identity. And in looking for my identity in men, or, trying to numb the pain of what had happened to me in my past, with drugs or alcohol, I wound up locked in this prison cell on my honeymoon with a guy that I met. I knew him 4 weeks in Los Angeles and 4 weeks on the phone before I decided that he kept saying he loved me. He was the lesser of the evils. I needed to get away from my celebrity friends who were now wanting to experiment with really hardcore drugs. And I thought, yeah, that's okay. I'm already taking a walk on the wild side, but I'm not going to do that. That's nuts. No, thank you. And I had this guy who was insistent to marry me. Now, there were a million red flags going off about this guy, but I thought, what the heck? I'll run off, I'll marry him, and if it doesn't work, then I'll just get a divorce. I had zero respect for the institution of marriage and not a lot of knowledge about what marriage really is biblically. So I run off to Paris, and in a whirlwind of experiences, which is why I had to write a book about it, because there's so much. But I ended up a week into this marriage in a car going on our honeymoon, quote unquote, to Italy, and discovered that he was trafficking drugs in the hood of our car. And when he got out of the car, we'd gotten onto an island called Sardinia in
Oh
Italy.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And when he left me alone in the car, well, he actually left me alone in a hotel room, and I went out, took the car, and took his packages and threw them out of the car on the side of a cliff near the hotel. Went back to the room. He came back to the room and almost beat the crap out of me. And that's when, the ranting and the raving about, you don't know what's going on. You don't know why I'm here. And he had already told me he was going to kill me before the end of the trip. So by that point, I just wanted to be free of him. And I was trying to call for help on the phone in the hotel. No one spoke English. I'm fluent in Italian now, and a lot of experience and needing to testify on my behalf and needing to understand. Uh, a lot of that is why I'm fluent. My grandmother is Italian, so I got a little bit from her growing up, but I needed to learn a language in order to fight for my freedom. And so anyway, in the course of tossing his drugs out, we end up getting arrested as he's dragging me down this road to find his drugs to take to whomever he's meeting there, which was, according to the story that would come out in the next 2 years of trials, he was part of a, not the cartel, it was part of a movement that was funding the purchase of arms for the Serbian Civil War at the time, if you remember the Serbs in Serbia and Croatia.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he was apparently, according to the Balkan group, that this organization that had investigated whatever was going on, they were moving 1 or 2 kilos of cocaine around the world for sale and using a couple of guys and mafia that were apparently in that part of Italy. So I end up, going to prison and arrested, and I spent 3 months in jail, and then another almost 2 years under house arrest, testifying. I ended up becoming a lead witness in the trial against him and trying to prove that I had nothing to do with it, that I was just a stupid girl in a lot of pain from some sexual abuse, and I needed a therapist, not a husband or a drug dealer. I just didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but in that jail cell, in those 3 months, I had a dream about a little nun. She wasn't a nun in my dreams. In my dream, it was an angel who came to me holding a book, and I had a conversation with her in this dream in which she holds this book out to me, but she's dressed all in white. Now, I thought of her as an angel, but she looked like a nun in a habit. I went to Catholic schools growing up, so that it made sense, right? I'm thinking, okay. And
Right.
she's holding onto a book, and she holds it out to me, and she says, "Do you know what this is?" And I said, "No." And I could see on the book it said "Good News." And she said, "This is the good news. This is God's word. And if you read it, he will save you. And if you commit your life to it, he will change you." And I remember it was so profound what she said, and the fact that she looked like my grandmother, who looked like a little angel, looked like completely,
Wow.
this one had on a white habit and crystal clear blue eyes and looked like, it was crazy. So I wake up the next morning, and the woman who ran the women's side of the prison came to my cell with a girl who was in the cell next door. Now, mind you, I think I'd been there a week, maybe by this point. I didn't know if anyone knew if I was alive or dead because I had not been allowed to talk to anyone. The consulate, my parents, nothing. So,
Right.
but this woman, Senora Mariucha, had such compassion for me. And when we would later communicate, she said, "I have daughters your age, and I've run the women's side of this prison for 20 years, and I know guilt and innocence when it walks in the door because it's in the eyes." And
Wow.
she really took care of me. And she comes to my cell with this English-Italian dictionary and the little girl from the cell next door. And they translate to me that there's someone who's going to come and visit me if I want to receive a visitor. So I thought, oh yeah, maybe my mom knows, maybe something's happened. Well, as we're standing there talking in the corridor, this long stone corridor, this little woman comes clipping down the corridor, and I'm looking at her, and I'm really taken aback because it's a nun, and she's dressed in this white habit, and she looks exactly like my grandmother and exactly like the angel from this dream.
Wow. Wow.
And when she gets to me, she smiles, and she takes her hand out of her robe, and she has a book in her hand, and she says in Italian, "Do you know what this is? Do you know what this is? You need to read it, because if you read it, God will save you. He will save you. Jesus will help you, and he'll change your life." And I look at the book, and she says this in Italian. They're translating. But I look at the book, and on the cover of the book, it says "The Good News." Was the good news.
Good news. Wow. Yeah. Cynthia, I got to tell you, I mean, stopping there, there's so many things going through my mind. And I'm sure the audience members, first of all, let's go back a little bit. You had this dream. At the time, were you scared out of your mind? Did you know what was going to happen to you? What was your emotional state like when all this stuff was happening?
I mean, I was devastated. I was wrecked. I'm the golden child in my family. I'm the oldest of my mother and father's 6 kids. I graduated from law school at a top 10 law school, USC, in the top of my class. I mean, the life that was planned out for me, I thought was over. I could barely get my mind around how with the privilege really that I grew up with, and boy, do I get political on that one sometimes, because I really did grow up. I went to great schools. I had, my father was the first black man to ever own banks in this country. My parents, as a mixed race couple, marched on Washington with Martin Luther King. My father became one of the wealthiest men in the country in the early 60s. Never a victim, never an excuse, never a limitation. I wasn't raised to be where I was. And I could hear my father saying, don't choose to be a victim. Don't choose to be a victim.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was devastated, and they were doping me up on Valium because I went into shock, but I could hear, I was really in a state of shock. I was crying almost 23 out of 24 hours a day, because I had no idea. They were telling me I was going to get 22 years in prison. I had no idea what was going on. And my face was plastered all over the television in my room every day and every night. So I knew this was a big story. I knew that I clearly had run off and married someone who had a whole assumed identity in life, which he did. But I just didn't know what was going to happen to me in all of it. And it was
the other thing, if I can interrupt just one moment, was there, and in retrospect, was there anybody praying for you? Or is this something that is totally a God thing, that usually there are parents or somebody's praying for you, and that's why God intervenes? Was that happening at the same time?
Well, it had to be, because my mother raised us in Catholic schools until I went to high school, and I went to Beverly Hills High School, and that's where everything went off the rails. But my mom's a good Catholic, so I know she and her sisters were praying. The whole family was praying, and my college fiance, his parents were on fire Christians. And they introduced me to TBN and to, discipleship. And so I was trying to come to Christ with him, but he cheated on me. And I went completely away from Christ, and I rebounded with this man that I ran off with. And
I see. Okay.
That's why, a lot of women wrap their relationship up with the Lord in a man, if it's been that love interest, or that has led them into a relationship with Christ. And it's one of the biggest admonitions I always make is, make this relationship your own. Because he's human, yeah. Jesus isn't. he may fail you, God never will.
Jesus will never fail you. So you're in the prison, the nun comes to you in a dream, you look at the good news, what happens?
Well, I fainted. And then I came to with them over me, kind of going, are you okay? Are you okay? And I just cried and cried and cried. And I got into bed. I asked for a pen, because I started taking notes on the back of napkins at that point. And then the Senora Mariucha, the brigadier over the women's prison, would give me note tablets to write on. I opened that Bible. It was the New Testament. Interestingly enough, in Hollywood, I really wasn't immersed in Hollywood yet, and I was raised a Catholic, but I didn't really know where I was, what my thing was. And I had been praying about it because of the ex-fiance's parents. Well, interestingly enough, Sister Angela, who remained my friend until she died last year, she said to me, when we could communicate, I learned really quickly to speak Italian. Everyone helped me. Everyone, because I'm a communicator. And when we could communicate, she said to me, I looked and looked for a full Bible. All I could find was the New Testament. And she said, so I figured it was okay, because you needed to read about Jesus first, then you could go back and read the rest of it. So I knew what God did. I knew. It wasn't, there's no doubt in my brain that it was the Lord himself who saved me And my
Mm.
becoming born again occurred with him personally. And I remember the day I felt born again. I felt new.
Wow.
You know, I
Yeah.
felt it. I felt the revelation and the reality and the love of Jesus died for me. He sees me. He sees me right here in this prison cell. And then, and the scripture was coming alive on the pages.
Mm.
It was just,
Mm.
it was incredible the way God was speaking me from the word. So it's like, it's one of those things that, life tries to take your faith in so many ways. You get tested, you go through stuff, it's hard. We all do. I get it. But when you have that personal encounter that you can look back to and go, wait a minute, he showed me he was real. It's not a coincidence. He sent an angel to my dreams who showed up at my door with the New Testament. Not anything else.
Mm.
God
You
help
know,
me understand Jesus.
this is interesting because a lot of people watching may have some head knowledge. They may have gone to church all their life. They may have even mentally ascend to Jesus. Hey, he's the Lord and God, but they've never had that real encounter. You know what I'm talking about? The real encounter. So many people go to church. So many churches are failing right now because they really don't know Jesus. They know of him. They've read of him, but you had a real encounter, a born again experience. And in a moment, we'll talk about this. It didn't end there. You went back into your lifestyle and, got back into the groove. And so what happened to you? So you gave your life to Christ. You've had this wonderful experience. And like so many people, they have this experience and then nothing happens for a while. What was your experience?
Well, I get back. My experience was he gave me everything I dreamed of as a little girl. He gave me a career on television. He gave me my own TV show. I got shot out of a cannon, like a cannonball with, the biggest agents in the industry who saw something in me and immediately signed me. And it just do. But like a lot of people, I wasn't being discipled. I didn't have deep fellowship with mature Christians. And
I,
I got very busy with the blessings and I was on this great ride with Jesus, but I was driving the car and he was in the back seat. And that's
mm,
through the years of that, my next step, and I've always seen my relationship with Christ like a stairway. And I remember very visually seeing my next step was called surrender. It was surrender. And I consider myself like a lot of people they call themselves Christians, but they're not lifestyle Christians. They're not surrender. Surrender to Christ as Lord of your life means you have that moment, which I had, where I counted the cost and I was like, okay, Lord, take it all. You can have the career, you can have the cars, you can have the famous friends, you can have all. I don't care. I just want more of you for me and the child you gave
wow,
me from that.
wow.
That was inside of my womb through that whole experience in Italy. That was born in Italy, and that the prophetic word spoken over his life had been incredible. And I knew I had not raised him in the Lord the way that I was supposed to have. And
Mm.
he was young, at the time. And I said, okay, Lord, I'm done. I don't care how you have to remake my life. And the beautiful thing is the Lord gives you a skill set. He gives you passions. He gives you dreams. He's not toying with you. He uses all of it, but he can use all of it in a way in which you're truly happy and truly fulfilled when you submit and surrender all of it to him and trust that he's going to resurrect the pieces of it that he wants you to actually walk in. And so what I still get to have my TV programs and get to do what I love to do, which is talk to people and share the gospel, which I was really prohibited from doing in Hollywood and had a couple of rounds with Sony Studios wanting to fire me off of the show one year in New York. And, I was the favorite host on the show. You know, and it actually was a gay executive producer who stuck up for me as he looked at this Christian woman. She was a raised Catholic, married to a Muslim man. And she said to me, I'll
Mm.
never forget it. She was the head of production for Sony Studios. And she said, well, why do you have to wear praying hands on your t-shirt? Why do you have to talk about it? I mean, I'm a Christian too. I just don't understand why you have to talk about it. That's not what we're supposed to do. And it was like, get thee behind me, Satan. And
Wow.
I remember looking at her even, and this is even before my own total surrender. But I remember I looked at her and I said, you know what? By their fruit, you will know them. You're not a Christian.
Mm.
You're a Christian in name only.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many Sunday Christians, right? Like, and that's the problem with Christianity today. It's the problem with our nation today. We're a nation built on Judeo-Christian values, and Christians won't walk in them.
You know, Cynthia, we're going to do a deep dive on that in the next segment, but because we're just kind of getting to know you and your story. But you hit something that we here in Battle Ready Ministries, and you even said it on the show. You're there. You want to arm women. You want to get them ready for the things that they're going to face and have been facing. And you're in the midst of the battle yourself. We're going to get into all that, but continuing with your story here, just for the next moment or two. You got back into the swing of things. You were getting all these accolades. Things were really happening. But what happened? And I think a lot of people would be interested to know, how did you come to surrender everything to Christ? What was the catalyst to do that?
Because even with a beautiful house on a hill and traveling in private planes with my friends and all of this access and blah, 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 my soul wasn't fulfilled. There was a void. There was a yearning. I had gained everything I thought I wanted, and I still wasn't happy. There was still unconfronted brokenness. There was still, I didn't even understand what it meant to be a joyful person, because I had so much brokenness from my childhood trauma and experiences, raped as a teenager, stuff I was carrying that I never dealt with. I found Jesus, but I never did the healing that Christ wants all of us to do in order to be whole and really walk with him. So I found Jesus and I went into Hollywood, kind of vocal, but eventually you're not vocal about Jesus. He's there, but you're having fun. You're now caught up in the world, and we're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. And you become
Was there a moment that you can remember that you thought, oh, this is, I'm done. I'm going to surrender everything. What was that moment like for you, if you could share that?
Well, I met someone on a plane. We became friends. He is a lovely man of God, and it wasn't an attraction thing. It wasn't that. He knew the Bible really well. And I had a million questions because I had just come to this crossroad where my conversations with God were as such: God, there has to be more than this. I've been watching Joyce Meyer in secret for 15 years, God, and I've seen visions of myself speaking to women and sharing the gospel and inspiring them, which I can't really do on my talk shows, because makeup tips and how to be a better date, that's not what women need, and I know it. And I just felt vacuumed in my soul. And so I met this man who would turn out to become my husband one day. But
that's good.
At the time, I was flying back to Philadelphia to do a product presentation for QVC. I used to sell a line of inspirational jewelry on QVC. And in our friendship, and I was dating someone else, someone who was lovely and was respectful of my decision that had just occurred to be celibate, abstinent. Because I'd done it my way my whole life. And my girlfriend, Pam, who's Ed McMahon's widow, looked at me one year and she said, Ed was a big mentor of mine early on. And Pam looked at me and she said, well, Sin, I think I introduced her to yet another boyfriend. Oh, Pam, he's great. He's cute. He just won an Emmy for this, or a great, whatever, actor, blah, blah. And she said, Sin, how's all this working for you? And I remember I looked at her and I just started laughing. I said, oh God, Pam, if I'm really real, it's not working for me at all, but whatever. but it was a deep question, and she's a believer. And, one of those believers who would say, doll, you got to work this issue out. So I meet this man on a plane. We become friends because he could answer my questions about the Lord. And I had a million questions. I was dating someone who I thought fit on paper, but he was Jewish. He was respectful of my celibacy, but he was a Jewish gentleman who used to run Disney, actually, with Michael Eisner. And so I thought, well, that makes sense. I mean, he'll take care of my career and my life. And he wanted to get married. And I have this friend, Roger, that I met on the plane. I said, Roger, what do you think about this? And he was planted and sowing. Well, you've read the Bible cover to cover from old to new by this point. So you're not equally yoked. Well, no, but he goes, well, honey, I'm not judging you, but there is no peace in an unequally yoked relationship because you're looking to make decisions with Christ. Is he going to do that? Does he want to do that? Well, no, I really don't talk to him about that. Oh, so you really can't be who you really are with him.
Wow.
Well, no,
wow.
I've never been. And I remember saying, I've never been who I really am with any guy except you. I mean, I didn't know anybody who was a mature enough Christian. And my husband is a theologian. He is no joke. He is no joke. And zero compromise. And a powerful man of God and powerfully anointed. And one day he looked at me and he said, as friends, he said, I see you in a suit and you're on a pulpit and you're teaching thousands of women. And I looked at him because that was a vision that I had always had of myself. And I just looked at him and I remember I started crying and I said, I don't see how that ever happens. And he said, God has it for you, Cynthia. He's going to have his way. And
wow.
He was constant. He was discipling. He was sowing. I was hungry. I had 28 questions a day about the word. Explain this to me. Show me this. So now he's my best friend. He's my rock. And I'm dating this other person. And one day something happened where I just went, I'm dating the wrong people. I need to be with a man of God who knows the word, who challenges me, who I'm hungry for this. I want God. Mm-hmm. And the Lord spoke. I mean, to condense a very long story, I heard an audible voice say to me, this is your husband. I heard it. It was wow. It was as cinematic as the angel bringing me the word. And I thought, and I was on the phone with Roger. And I thought, all I could do was cry because I was like, Lord, this is impossible because I have friend zoned this guy so hard. Like, he's never coming out of friend zone. He is way down there, at the field goal line. I just have completely ruined this. And I was dating someone else, but I knew what I heard. And as I sat on the phone crying, Roger started chuckling and he said, well, I've got people praying for you all over the world. I wondered when you were going to figure this out. He had heard from the Lord 6 months prior that I was his wife. But the Lord told him, do not say a word.
Cynthia, we've got to wrap this part up. We're going to continue this. This is too good not to stop now, but we do have to stop because of time and sponsors and everything else, but we're going to continue. So thank you. And everybody stay tuned because second episode is going to be better even than the first. But I got a question for everybody out there. Are you battle ready? Hello, this is Colonel David Gimona, my co-author, Pulitzer Prize nominated investigative journalist Troy Anderson, and I invite you to read our book to learn how to navigate these chaotic times. If you're sick and tired of the fake media and all the things that are surrounding you today, get our book anywhere books are sold.